Labour Party will be a good faith guarantor of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and has committed to fixing the Northern Ireland Protocol. We'll be live in both Scotland and Northern Ireland in a moment. We'll speak to Dougie Beattie in Belfast, but first let's speak to Olivia Uckley, who's in Inverness for us. Well, Olivia, it's been the Prime Minister's first visit since he became Prime Minister to Scotland. How has he been received?
Well, Rishi Sunak is certainly at pains to say just how cordial and constructive the meeting with Nicola Sturgeon was. And of course, his relationship with Sturgeon and the SNP is better than his predecessor. Liz Truss said that Nicola Sturgeon was an attention seeker and the best policy was to ignore her. Also good for Rishi Sunak that his popularity in Scotland is higher than either Liz Truss or Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson's popularity here was notoriously low. Those are the good sides. The other good side, of course, are these free ports, which is very exciting for Inverness and for Edinburgh. Up to £50 million worth of government funding into green startups, plus a load of tax incentives to help grow the economy here. But, of course, as we knew, Rishi Sunak and Nicola Sturgeon are diametrically opposed on pretty much all the biggest issues facing the UK. And already today we're beginning to see lots of briefings from both of them, which show that, yes, it might have been cordial, but this meeting certainly wasn't friendly. On the NHS, Nicola Sturgeon saying that Rishi Sunak hasn't promised any more money to avert more strikes. And then on the issue of independence, Rishi Sunak has said that everyone in Edinburgh and London should be relentlessly focused on the issues that matter to the UK, i.e. not independence. The other issue, of course, the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, hugely controversial. The Westminster government is threatening to block this Holyrood legislation, which would be pretty much unprecedented. Nicola Sturgeon is not happy about that, nor Stephen Flynn, SNP man in Westminster, who both say it's a question of democracy that this act manages to get through. So Rishi Sunak might be pleased this evening that the visit did go down, better than a Boris Johnson visit might have gone down as, but that's a pretty low base, and it's hard to see very much common ground that Sunak and Sturgeon can find together.
And Olivia, you mentioned Boris Johnson there. There's been some speculation that there might be a deal between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson to prevent Boris Johnson trying to come back as leader. Were there any questions around that today, or was that mentioned at all?
No, it's a question of Boris Johnson has said this before, that he might go into a deal with Rishi Sunak. We saw that happen over the summer and it never manifested into anything. Rishi Sunak is very keen to shut down all conversation about that. We'll see what happens in the weeks ahead, but personally I think it's unlikely.
Olivia, thank you. Earlier on, you were standing, I think, in front of the lovely Anglican Cathedral in Inverness. I'm not sure that that's a better background for you now, but in any event, we're delighted to see you coming in from Inverness. Dougie, you're in a beautiful part of the world, of course. You're at Stormont. Tell us what's happening over there.
Well, in the last couple of days, we've had quite the events here of high-profile politicians. We had James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, and then we had, of course, Keir Starmer today and yesterday. And both of them are trying to look at the issues in and around the protocol that is keeping the institutions behind us down, because unionists, of course, won't go in there. Keir Starmer started his speech today in Queen's University saying that we must look to the past but move forward, because the past is a painful place. Well, of course, if we're going to avoid the mistakes of the past, we have to know our history. And of course, unionists here do not recognise where their laws are made in the EU, because it's, of course, a foreign country to unionist Northern Ireland. They do not recognise the border in the Irish Sea, and they claim there is no sense in being in government behind us here because there is no representation. That all seems very similar to that of the 1970s. Keir also offered cover for the Tories, particularly if they wanted to take on the ERG, because he said that if there was a deal coming in the coming weeks, to take it, and he would give Rishi Sunak that cover. That would suggest that Keir Starmer is very much heading towards realignment with the EU, and that he may need to give that cover to Rishi Sunak because those in his party may not like where he's going with the realignment of the European Union.
Tell me, Dougie, he said if the Prime Minister wanted to take on the ERG, that he would support him in doing that. But if the deal doesn't get the support of the ERG, it's very unlikely to get the support of the Democratic Unionist Party, isn't it?
Well, that's it in a nutshell. And really and truly behind us, it's not only now the Democratic Unionist Party, it's every unionist does not support the protocol. That's the whole point of this argument. And the sister party of the Labour Party, the SDLP, are trying to put a motion forward here at Stormont to make it different how we can elect a speaker. So therefore, what they're effectively doing is going to try and exclude unionism, which will bring us back to Sunningdale in the 1970s when there's a government of only one side. So we do need to look towards the past, painful or not.
Well, Dougie in Stormont and Olivia up in Inverness, thank you for those reports. And joining me now in the studio is Henry Hill, the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. So these two men are on their travels. Henry, the Prime Minister up in Scotland, he got a better reception than his predecessors, but that was hardly a surprise, as Olivia said.
No, Boris Johnson was spectacularly unpopular in Scotland, even by the standards of recent Conservative Prime Ministers. So Rishi outperforming Boris is not particularly challenging.
Absolutely. And the story about Freeports, of course, is a positive one.
Yeah.
It's about jobs, it's about investment. But there are big differences between the two leaders, between Nicola Sturgeon and Rishi Sunak, whether it's on the gender recognition bill or indeed the referendum for independence. Yes.
So all sorts of issues. You know, as you say, there's this big constitutional clash over the gender bill, which could be one of the biggest stories of 2023 from that standpoint. Also, energy. Nicola Sturgeon is talking about a complete moratorium on new North Sea oil drilling. Now, part of the UK government's strategy, even as we move towards net zero, is that actually we should be digging up as much of our own oil as possible rather than importing it from Russia or Azerbaijan or Saudi Arabia. Yeah. So that's another clear point of clash. So yes, there's plenty of things for the two to fall out about.
And then Sir Keir Starmer, the Leader of the Opposition, he's in Belfast today at my old alma mater, Queen's University, giving us a speech where he said his two priorities were, first of all, that the UK government needs to strengthen their relationship with Dublin and normalise their relationship with Dublin. Interesting that he puts that first. And then secondly, to deal with the protocol.
Yeah, I mean, it says a lot about Labour's priorities, which have always been slightly different to the Conservatives, if we can put it that way. I think, based on what Keir's saying, his hope is that the government comes back with a deal which the ERG will reject, but which the DUP might accept, which basically is a high alignment deal that doesn't really get rid of the sea border, but at least like obviates it in most cases. And if that were the case, theoretically, if the DUP signed off on it, then Labour could help the Prime Minister face down the ERG. I don't think that's very likely. Yeah. I also think that we've already seen on planning reform that the Prime Minister is deeply reluctant to pass things with Labour votes against his own party. So that's another firewall. But the big challenge is the DUP. Ultimately, everyone I've spoken to in Westminster acknowledges it doesn't matter if they get on well with Maros Sefcovic. It doesn't matter if they'd rather talk about something else. If you can't get the DUP to get back into Stormont, the deal's not going to work. It's
clever politics, though, from Sir Keir Starmer, isn't it? Because people want to see that the Conservatives and the Labour Party work together on Northern Ireland. So he's saying, I'm going to support you if you're doing this in the national interest, if you're going to make a deal work, regardless of what the ERG are doing, I will help you. It's clever politics.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's classic Good Friday theatre, right? Yeah. Like, everybody puts on a very sombre face and they talk about how important it is.
And talk slowly, apparently.
Yeah, and talks slowly and talks about how important it is that we all just get on with and kind of skate over the very real political differences, because there's a tendency to treat Northern Ireland as if it's constantly just this fragile vase that people are going to drop, rather than a country full of people who have completely different legitimate views about all kinds of things. But I think ultimately the trap the Prime Minister has really fallen into is that, you know, we've got the quarter centenary of the Belfast Agreement coming up. Joe Biden wants to come and do a big visit. Yeah. Everyone's keen to get Stormont back, but there is no deal that the DUP will accept. And so the clock is ticking and the pressure is piling on the Prime Minister, but I don't see his way out.
And of course, apart from Sir Keir Starmer and James Cleverly, the Foreign Minister, he was in Belfast as well this week. Leo Varadkar, the new Taoiseach, was in town as well, and he made some interesting comments as well. He's already said that mistakes were made in relation to the protocol. He said mistakes that were made on all sides, and he said that perhaps the implementation of the protocol was, in his words, too strict and too rigid. I mean, is that significant, do you think, Henry?
I mean, it's significant if and only if it leads to a change in the EU's negotiating position, because ultimately, where we currently are, which is the UK government basically keeping the protocol on the table by ignoring large chunks of it.
Yeah.
But the theoretical position is entirely down to those original positions that Dublin took and that London took. So if Dublin now believes that some of those positions were mistaken, logically, that should mean that actually we've got the space to reopen the EU's negotiating mandate, maybe look at some of those fundamental issues. If, on the other hand, they say, oh, well, obviously mistakes were made, but fundamentally the EU's mandate is what it is, then it's meaningless. Well,
have I missed it, or has their mandate been changed, the EU negotiators?
Not that I've
Well, certainly not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, I thought, that Leo Varadkar said that he had useful and constructive talks with the DUP because they have been headbutting each other for quite some time.
And I think most people want a deal, right? I say even the DUP. The DUP, the unionist parties, they want a deal
because they want devolution.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ultimately, which people like me don't necessarily want. But they want devolution. They want devolution back. They just want to get rid of the sea border. And if there's a path towards doing that, then great. I'm just sceptical because we've not seen that flexibility from the EU at any point in this process. They were handed this position by Theresa May's hapless government.
Yeah.
And I don't see them letting it go.
Yeah, for sure. I think I probably agree with you, Henry. I'm sorry to say as well, I'm quite sceptical about the prospects of a deal, but others disagree and think that a deal is coming. But we'll wait and see, and we'll, of course, be reporting on all of that here on GB News. But coming up, we'll be discussing whether there needs to be specific legislation to make the spiking offence criminal after the government have reversed Priti Patel's proposals to do just that. We'll also be talking to Lord Dannett, the former Chief of the General Staff, about what additional support the UK can provide for Ukraine. Before that, let's take a look at the weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update. Colder weather on the way as we go through this weekend. Feels pretty cold out there today with the gusty winds, but they'll be easing. And many places seeing a bit of sunshine today. But low pressure is still nearby. These weather systems waiting to head our way. One low is clearing away, but this weather front is just dangling down across southwest Scotland, northwest England, bringing quite a few showers in here. Showers across northern Scotland too, but elsewhere, many places not seeing any showers today. Dry and bright and with a bit of sunshine to boot. The wind's steadily easing through the day as well, but making it feel cold, certainly. Temperatures around average or a touch above 7 to 8 degrees, generally 10 or 11 across the south. But colder air, as I said, is on the way through the weekend. But not tonight, because tonight we're going to see further rain coming in. Those weather systems out in the Atlantic bringing rain initially for Northern Ireland, then across Wales this evening. That rain persistent across Wales and southwest England by the morning time could cause some issues here as that rain continues to build up. That rain will be bringing milder air, so early in the night we could get down to -2 in northern Scotland, but by morning we're generally well above freezing and certainly 10 or 11 degrees across the south. A mild but wet start then to Saturday for the majority, but that rain is going to pull away out to the east, so many places becoming drier through the afternoon, but there'll be lots of showers then packing into Northern Ireland and western Scotland with snow on the hills likely here. Temperatures will drop through the afternoon, so in the morning we could be at 11 or 12 by the afternoon, many of us in single figures, and again feeling colder because of the gusty winds, which will continue to blow showers in across northern areas during Saturday night, turning increasingly to snow, even to lower levels by the end of the night across northern Scotland. It is turning colder, and through Sunday night in particular, this area of low pressure could bring some places some snowfall, certainly turning frostier with the risk of ice into next week.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to the briefing. Well, more and more of us nowadays are trying to get more active, lose weight and become healthier. How about those in schools? Well, in a bid to encourage youngsters to get active from a younger age, West Yorkshire has become one of the first regions in the UK to launch a walking programme to encourage over 900 nursery and primary school children to walk to school. Our reporter Anna Riley has sent this report, which contains some flashing images.
Children at LePage Primary School and Nursery in Bradford are among the first to be part of a pioneering scheme to get youngsters to become more active. The £55,000 project, which encourages pupils to walk to school, has been championed by the Mayor of West Yorkshire, who hopes it will also improve air quality in the region.
Sadly, 1 in 20 deaths in West Yorkshire are associated with poor air quality. So this is an initiative that I can take as the Mayor, and hopefully we'll be rolling that out across more schools in West Yorkshire, working with Living Streets. It really does help in the long term for all the family, not just the kids, the parents too, to try and find some time in the week to walk to school.
Those behind the project are hoping healthy travel habits instilled in the children will last them a lifetime.
As part of our journey in terms of trying to prepare children to become young, responsible and healthy citizens of society, this has just been an amazing opportunity for us to start with the youngest children in school and really engage them in fun ways to become more active.
Charity Living Streets is part of the scheme and has a mission to inspire more people in Britain to walk.
Walking is ultimately the easiest form of exercise. You don't need any specialist equipment and anyone can do it. So walking is really if you want to increase the amount of activity you do as your New Year's resolution, walking is by far the easiest way to do it.
And the kids here certainly seem up for the challenge.
We have to walk because it's better for the planet. The nice exercise because it's good for the earth. I don't know, to school with the scooter.
These little feet are hoping to make big steps forward in 2023 to help the environment and boost their fitness. Anna Riley, GB News, Bradford.
So thanks, Anna, for that lovely little report there. Well, a number of MPs have been putting pressure on the government to bring forward legislation to make spiking a separate criminal offence. It reportedly includes former Home Secretary Priti Patel, as well as members of the Home Affairs Select Committee. However, the government has now suggested that existing laws may cover spiking, dismaying campaigners who wanted to see a specific law being introduced. Well, joining me to discuss whether there is a need for additional legislation is the campaign leader of Stamp Out Spiking, Dawn Dines. Dawn, it's really good to see you back on the programme again. Thank you for joining me. Last time we were speaking, I think we were talking about the upcoming criminal legislation, but now that all seems to be pushed to one side. I presume that you're very disappointed by that.
I was absolutely gutted, I've got to say. I was at the Westminster Hall debate and I was sat watching and listening to all of the MPs give their evidence. And, you know, it's not just all the MPs. We've got the National Chief Police Council who've agreed. We've got the Association of all the Police and Crime Commissioners across the whole of the UK who agree that spiking needs to be a separate criminal offence. So I just don't understand, really, what's happening.
And has there been any attempt to explain to you as the campaign lead in all of this as to why this has happened?
Well, do you know what? That I actually left Westminster with some hope. So I don't know whether I took it totally different than everybody else, because it seemed to me that at the end of it, the Minister Tom, sorry, I can't pronounce his name very well.
Tom Tugendhat, yeah.
Yeah. So the Minister Tom, I'll call him, you know, when I spoke to him at the end of the debate and I said, look, I've been campaigning against this disgusting crime for 20 years. And, you know, it's said that they're going to go back and look at maybe making an amendment to the existing laws. But as long as that includes spiking written within that law, because all these hundreds of people that we've spoken to over all of these years, you know, all the victims of this crime, it really needs to be, spiking needs to be, it needs a separate criminal offence to show, to give clear guidance, to make all the data recordable.
Yeah, because, I mean, the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, was very clear on this with you, wasn't she? Because she thought it was a disgusting offence. It was perpetrated by sexual predators and there needed to be a specific criminal offence. And that's what she still believes, as I understand it, Dawn. So hopefully you'll have a powerful ally with you on that.
Yes, I'm hoping so. I also had a chance to meet with Priti Patel and, you know, she was very instrumental in trying to get the law changed as well. And I understand that to make a new law may be quite difficult, but at the end of the day, making an amendment to the current law will then make it recordable, and it's that data that we need. You know, they've come back and said there was 5,000 spiking incidents last year. The year before, we'd done a survey and over 97% of victims didn't report this crime to the police.
Well, Dawn, thank you very much. And if there is a change in the direction of travel, we'll certainly have you back on again to discuss all of that. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Henry's still with me. Thanks, Dawn. Henry's still with me. I mean, this is something where Priti Patel was pretty clear. She wanted a specific offence. It now seems Suella Braverman has changed that and has said that there's already legislation that covers this, Henry. I mean, what's your understanding of it?
So basically, without knowing all of the specifics of this case, there are a couple of issues that the government could have. The first is simply that the legislative timetable is very full already. You know, it takes time and space in Parliament to draw up and pass a new bill. The government's legislative timetable is already very full, so they might think they just have trouble getting it in by the next election. The other one, which is a slightly bigger picture concern, is that it's very easy to call for this or that to be made illegal or have a specific law. It's very easy for politicians, which is what, you know, PCSEs are, to do that.
Yeah.
So I am sympathetic when a government department and the civil service push back and say, actually, this is actually already covered by existing legislation. Now, I don't know in this case whether or not that is actually adequate, but often what will happen is you'll get lots of MPs and politicians calling for this, that or the other, and it will go to the civil service and the civil service lawyers, and they'll go, well, actually...
But I suppose it's the difference between civil service lawyers saying it's already covered by law and getting prosecutors to take a case based on the existing law. I mean, that's probably where the gap exists, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is almost certainly work that the Home Secretary and the Home Office can do. And I think if they're not going to bring forward this law...
Or giving clear guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if they're not going to bring forward this legislation, then the bare minimum we should expect from Suella Braverman is a clear acknowledgement that there is a problem and a clear statement of what the Home Office will do instead.
Thanks, Henry. Well, coming up, we'll be talking to the former Chief of the General Staff, Lord Richard Dannett, about whether Britain should be providing tanks to the Ukraine Armed Forces and which is the best pub in the country. Stay tuned to find out. But first, here's Rhiannon with your news headlines.
Arlene, thank you. It's 2:31, your top stories from the GB newsroom. Manchester City footballer Benjamin Mendy has been found not guilty of 6 counts of rape and 1 count of sexual assault. It follows a 6-month trial at Chester Crown Court. Jurors couldn't reach verdicts on 1 count of rape and 1 of attempted rape. The prosecution sought a retrial on those counts, which has been scheduled for June. A builder who described himself as a psychopath with a conscience has been sentenced to 2 life terms in prison for the murder of 2 escorts. Mark Brown was found guilty of murdering Leah Ware and Alexandra Morgan in 2021. They went missing 6 months apart. The 41-year-old killed the 2 women at a remote farm near St Leonard's in East Sussex after meeting them through an escort website. He'll serve a minimum of 49 years. Scotland will gain 2 new green free ports. The sites in Edinburgh and Inverness are part of a £52 million fund to drive growth in the country. Ministers say they'll also create 75,000 jobs and bring in almost £11 billion worth of investment. The announcement follows private talks held last night between Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Scotland's First Minister, referred to by Nicola Sturgeon as constructive. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the time for action on the Northern Ireland Protocol is now. Delivering his key speech at Queen's University in Belfast, Sir Keir also promised his party will remain a good faith guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement. He's urged the Prime Minister to recognise past mistakes and resolve issues over the post-Brexit trading arrangements.
So I say to the Prime Minister, if there is a deal to do in coming weeks, do it. Whatever political cover you need, whatever mechanisms in Westminster you require, if it delivers for our national interest and the people of Northern Ireland, we will support you. The time for action on the protocol is now.
And the economy unexpectedly grew by 0.1% between October and November. That's despite the soaring cost of living. The Office for National Statistics recorded a slowdown in growth, though, after a 0.5% increase in the previous month. It says the economy was helped by people filling the pubs to watch the World Cup. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says the government has a clear plan to halve inflation this year and get the economy growing again. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. It's back to the briefing with Arlene in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to the briefing. Well, earlier this week, it was revealed that the United Kingdom is considering sending Challenger 2-type tanks to Ukraine. Other nations have been increasing their military aid for the country as the Ukrainian armed forces move to retake their territory in the east. The United States, Germany and France are sent to provide infantry fighting vehicles and armoured personnel carriers. Former Chief of the General Staff, Lord Richard Dannett, has urged the government to provide Ukraine with the support they need. Well, joining me now to discuss what the government needs to do is that man himself, Lord Richard Dannett. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I wanted to go back to the time when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister and we were leading on our support for Ukraine. Do you think that that has changed since Boris left office?
Well, there's no doubt that when Boris Johnson was the Prime Minister, we were the cheerleaders, certainly amongst the Europeans, as far as support to Ukraine is concerned. I don't think it's fair to say that Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak have toned that down, but I think particularly Rishi Sunak is very conscious of the cost of support to the war. But with all due respect to him, I think that rather misses the point. The Russian aggression in Ukraine, of course, is a challenge to Ukraine, but actually it's a much wider challenge. It's a challenge to the established international rule of law. It's a challenge to security of Europe more widely. And then I think we're absolutely obliged to go on supporting Ukraine, not just not to lose this war, but frankly now to win it.
And as I understand it, Ukraine are looking for somewhere in the region globally for around 300 tanks. And we have offered to send 12 Challenger tanks. Is that enough, Lord Dannett?
Well, it's not. Go back to my earlier point. We have done a lot to prevent Ukraine losing this war. But it's in all our interests to help them win it. Now, why do I say win it? That's because trying to argue the point that this war could be concluded by negotiations just doesn't work. If you look at the potential opening positions of Zelensky, he has said that he wants Ukraine to control all sovereign Ukrainian territory. That's the Donbass, and that includes Crimea as well. Putin, of course, feels he's got to get something out of the war, which means that he's got to control some part of Ukraine. So those positions are irreconcilable. Therefore, you come to the conclusion that the only way this conflict is going to come to a conclusion is on the battlefield. And if we want to help the Ukrainians win, we have got to provide the support to allow them to do that. That's from America, from Britain, from France, from Germany, and from other European countries, particularly Eastern European countries. And it can be done, it should be done, and it should be done very quickly.
And you speak there about negotiations and the fact that that's not going to work and we need to support Ukraine to win the war. There's been some speculation that Putin may announce that he's going to stand down in the next couple of years. Have you heard that, first of all? And secondly, do you put any store by the fact that he may think that he's on the way out?
I don't think he's in control of his own destiny now. I think those that are the policymakers in the Kremlin, even those who are die-hard Putin supporters, will actually realise that not only has the war been a mistake, but his conduct and handling of the war has been dire. So I think for him to say, I think I'll stand down in 2 years' time, frankly, he'll be history in 2 years' time. He'll be lucky to be there, well, perhaps not in 2 months, but certainly in 12 months' time. Yeah. This issue, as I said just now, has got to come to a head in 2023. It's got to come to a head on the battlefield. Yes, I'm delighted that the UK is planning to send a Challenger tanks. 12 is not enough, given that we have quite a large holding of Challenger 2 tanks, and we're only going to refurbish 136 of them to a higher grade. We've got many spare tanks, as indeed we have Warrior infantry fighting vehicles. We should lead the way in showing to America, France and Germany that we're serious about this and put a decent number of vehicles on the table.
And if I can bring you finally back home, again, obviously the budget's coming soon and Ben Wallace will be looking very carefully at the budget as regards Army. In particular, as I understand it, he wants to make sure that he has capability for the future. What do you feel is needed when that budget comes? Do you think that Ben will get the support that he needs from the Prime Minister?
Well, I think he's going to have really quite a battle, but it's in a wider context of a refreshment of the integrated review of our foreign security and defence policy, which was issued in March 2021. That made certain judgments based on the geostrategic situation as it was in March 2021. But then, subsequently, we now have a land war in Europe starting on the 24th of February last year. That is a huge change to the geostrategic set of circumstances. And I think everyone would recognise that within the priority of defence, the army, our land forces, has been a very low priority in recent years. But now with the threat of a resurgent Russia, an aggressive Russia, and I think that will remain even after Putin, then we have to consider a greater investment in our land forces. And that for us, not only what we're going to give to the Ukrainians to win the immediate war, is that we've got to make sure that we have enough land manoeuvre capability. That's tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, artillery, air defence, communications, and all the modern technology that goes with it. That's not cheap. But frankly, if we're going to be taken seriously as playing our part in European collective security, we've got to finance that.
Lord Dannett, thank you. I think that's an excellent point to ask my guest about now. Henry, that was a very good point, was it not, that when that strategic review came out, there wasn't a war in Ukraine, and therefore assumptions have changed?
Yeah, I think this has been a problem that's dogged British strategic reviews for a long time, is that basically they're all like, well, if everything's fine and we project these trends forever, then we can spend as little as possible. And then things happen because things have a habit of happening. The big problem is, with so much pressure on the public finances, with the NHS, in a constant state of crisis, defence is expensive, and defence is one of the things that's easiest for politicians to cut. So it's not just a matter of whether or not...
Until there's a war.
Until there's a war. So
Exactly.
it's not just a question of whether or not Rishi Sunak will make the commitments now, it's whether or not in 5 years' time, if the money's tight again, the next Prime Minister doesn't go, well, maybe we can trim the defence budget.
Yes, but I have to say Ben Wallace has been quite strong on the need to have army capability and the need to have that in place. And so there will be a battle between him and Treasury coming up. I think that's one of the battles that we'll very clearly see. Meanwhile, the NHS continues to take a huge amount of the budget, not in the devolved regions particularly, but right across the UK. Surely something has to be done about that.
I mean, in theory, yes, but I don't think the Tories can do it. It's probably one of those ones that Labour has to do, because the problem you have with the NHS is that it simultaneously spends less money on healthcare than a lot of other countries as a share of GDP, but it's also an unsustainably high level of government spending, because the NHS model is that basically everything has to be paid for by the government. You don't bring in private money, you don't bring in money through, people like me don't pay for insurance that contributes to the NHS, private companies, and the result is it's very expensive whilst at the same time not spending enough money. So what we really need to do in the medium to long term is find a way that moves the NHS onto a more sustainable model that makes sure everyone gets care and that there is universal provision and nobody goes without because they can't afford it, but where people who can afford it probably contribute. But the Tories can't make that decision. That's something I think only Labour can really do.
And that's probably why it's very interesting that Wes Streeting made those comments about reform in the NHS. And do you actually think a Labour government would engage in reform?
Well, they tried, right? I mean, the thing we forget about the NHS is that Tony Blair tried to do something a lot like this in 2007, and the Tories voted it down. So Labour could do it, because ultimately these sums aren't changing depending on who's in power. If you listen to Labour politicians now, they talk about they've got a windfall tax and a few other bits and bobs, but they're not bringing in that much extra money.
That's right.
So there's no massive spending programme that can, save the NHS in the long run. You need strategic reform, structural reform. Labour have the goodwill to bring the public with them on that. The Tories don't.
Yeah, no, interesting point. I'm sure we'll return to it again. But now we're going to a pub. More than 250 pubs were entered into this year's Pub of the Year competition, but only one could be the winner. Today it's been announced that the Tamworth Tap in Staffordshire has won the award, and we sent our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson there. Hi Jack, how are you?
Oh, this is the best day I've ever had in my life, Arlene. I've spent the whole day with a pint in hand and speaking to the people in this pub, and it's absolutely fantastic. The pub itself dates back to the 16th century. The bottom floor of this is an old 16th century shop front. Some of these beams you can see behind me date back to the Tudor period. In the courtyard and the beer garden, we've got Saxon and Norman walls with the Tamworth Castle overlooking this fantastic pub, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's one of the reasons why this pub was chosen by CAMRA, the Campaign for Real Ales, as the best pub in the UK. It was initially 52,000 pubs in the UK. That was then whittled down further and further until we got to the final 4, and the Tamworth Tap here won the award. And I spoke to owner George Greenaway to find out how it felt to win.
Incredible, absolutely ecstatic. I've just been immensely proud of the achievement of obviously myself and the whole team and ultimately the whole town, really. It was never going to be a pub. It was only going to be a little microbrewery with the odd tap house appearance. So to actually have got to this stage and persuaded into becoming centre of hospitality in the town by the townsfolk has been incredible, really.
So this place initially, 5 years ago, wasn't here. This has only been a microbrewery and a pub for the last 5 years, and the owners just added to it. Some of the things that CAMRA judged this on are things like decor, atmosphere, and of course the beer as well. And I can tell you, it's very, very good.
Ability for GB News with drinking all that beer for us today. I want to thank you for doing that. But we all have our own idea about what makes a good pub. Have the judges let you into an idea as to why specifically this pub was above everybody else?
The thing it mainly comes down to is the element of community. That's one of the big things that CAMRA stands for, about having pubs and old-fashioned kind of clubs being a big part of their community, and that's why this was chosen, because when judges visited here, there was an art club going on upstairs. It promotes local artists with music performances in the summer and in the evenings outside. So the fact that this pub, even though it's been here for just 5 years, has become so entrenched in the community is the thing that really tips it over the edge for the judges.
OK, Jack, thanks for joining us, and go straight home after this broadcast. In a taxi as well. So, the latest monthly GDP figures show that the UK economy has grown by 0.1% in November. The Football World Cup is believed to have had an impact. However, it remains to be seen whether growth will continue across the full final quarter of 2022. The last quarterly figures showed a 0.3% decline in the economy. So do the November figures bring hope that the UK will now be able to avoid a recession? Well, joining me to discuss all of that is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. So, Liam, are we in a recession or not?
We've got the wrong job, Arlene. We should be drinking beers with
exactly.
young Mr. Carson there on a Friday afternoon. Very nice work if you can get it. This is actually some good news, I may say. I often come here and get accused of being the dismal scientist.
The doomster.
Which, that age-old name for economics, the dismal science. But this is actually pretty good news, a chink of light. Green shoots, we might even say.
Oh, gracious.
Let's have a look at some of the numbers here. As you say, GDP, that is all goods and all transactions in the UK economy, increased 0.1% in November compared to the month before. Within the manufacturing sector, there was actually a drop of 0.5%, though the manufacturing sector is very, very volatile. Services, which make up a huge part of our economy, up 0.2%. And here's the kicker. Beverage and food services, a whopping 2.2% up on the month before, and that is right there, the Qatar World Cup effect. So does that mean that we will avoid recession? Now, a recession is 2 successive quarters, 3-month periods of economic contraction. In the third quarter of last year, July, August, September, we had some economic contraction, as you said during your lead-in. So the question is, will we get economic contraction in October, November, December? With this November figure being positive, it may mean that the entire fourth quarter of next year, of last year, is positive. So we will then avoid that 2 successive quarters of negative GDP growth. Recession, it isn't just a kind of concept, a number. The reality is, if the Bank of England thinks we didn't go into recession and it thinks that the economy will grow faster this year than we previously thought, that's good news, of course, but it may mean that they'll probably put interest rates up more. They won't worry about the impact of interest rates going up on economic activity as much as they previously would. But overall, these November numbers, Arlene, are much, much better than most economists thought.
Yeah.
They're the official ONS numbers, the Office for National Statistics. They may be revised, but we have to embrace good news where we can get it at the moment.
And I'm sure the government's very happy with this news as well, because, of course, Rishi Sunak has set his target on halving inflation, as you know. So this will be good news for him.
It will be good news for him. On the other hand, he did say, didn't he, in his opening speech of this year, his first big set-piece speech as Prime Minister, that inflation would halve by the end of the year. From it's currently, well, the latest number is 10.7% in November. We'll get the December number quite soon. But, you know, even the Office of Budget Responsibility says that inflation's going to be like 3.8% by the end of this year. So it's a bit like Rishi Sunak saying, oh, I think June's going to be sunnier than January, and that's because of me.
You're such a cynic.
I just think it's arithmetically inevitable that inflation is going to go down quite a lot. I've been predicting that for some time. We're seeing now energy prices coming down.
Yes.
Not so much household bills. I think, I've said this many times, they'll deny it. I think the Ofgem energy regulator should be examining why household bills aren't coming down faster, given that wholesale energy prices are coming down. But those wholesale energy prices will mean big companies can get cheaper access to energy, and that feeds into, hopefully, lower inflation. So the cost of living squeeze, it's not over yet.
No.
We could see quite a lot of economic sluggishness in the first half of this year. But I have to say, this November GDP number, it's not too bad.
Yeah. And I suppose it goes to show as well that economic forecasts, they certainly are not an exact science. So we were told we were definitely going into a recession, weren't we? And that we would be in a recession by now. And that causes a lot of anxiety for people, Liam. I mean, I was speaking to people and they're worried about, you know, household bills and how they're going to find money to go on holiday next year. And yet we now see that this shows that we're not in a recession.
Well, whatever you think of her, somebody called Liz Truss once said from the campaign podium, I was there, economic forecasts are not destiny, and they're absolutely not destiny. They are just that, forecasts. Economists get predictions wrong a lot more than they get them right. And I do think journalists can be guilty of too much doom-mongering when it comes to the economy. I think a lot of journalists, I have to say this, like to see the UK doing badly, particularly if they voted Remain and they're bitter about Brexit. I don't think this is a conspiracy. I do think there's a kind of group of commentators who like to blame everything on Brexit and say Britain's doing really badly. Look, this GDP number in November is not too bad. I think inflation will tame significantly during 2023, and the cost of living squeeze will ease for most people. That's good news. There's still a great deal of economic uncertainty out there, though. That is also the reality. Not least if this ghastly war between Russia and Ukraine continues. If there's a real escalation and energy prices spike once again, then all bets are off. Inflation at the end of this year could even be higher than it is now.
Yeah. OK. I'm sorry to stop you on that point, but we do try to be optimistic in GB News. And Henry, thank you for coming along today and joining me. And Liam, thank you for coming in as well. Well, that's the briefing for this Friday. I'll be back next Friday at 2 p.m. And up next, it's Patrick Christie's.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update. Colder weather on the way as we go through this weekend. Feels pretty cold out there today with the gusty winds, but they'll be easing. And many places seeing a bit of sunshine today, but low pressure is still nearby. These weather systems waiting to head our way. One low is clearing away, but this weather front is just dangling down across southwest Scotland, northwest England, bringing quite a few showers in here. Showers across northern Scotland too, but elsewhere, many places not seeing any showers today. Dry and bright and with a bit of sunshine to boot. The wind's steadily easing through the day as well, but making it feel cold, certainly. Temperatures around average or a touch above 7 to 8 degrees generally, 10 or 11 across the south. But colder air, as I said, is on the way through the weekend. But not tonight, because tonight we're going to see further rain coming in. Those weather systems out in the Atlantic being rain initially for Northern Ireland, then across Wales this evening. That rain persistent across Wales and southwest England by the morning time could cause some issues here as that rain continues to build up.
That rain will be bringing milder air, so early in the night we could get down to -2 in northern Scotland, but by morning we're generally well above freezing and certainly 10 or 11 degrees across the south. A mild but wet start then to Saturday for the majority, but that rain is going to pull away out to the east, so many places becoming drier through the afternoon, but there'll be lots of showers then packing into Northern Ireland and western Scotland, with snow on the hills likely here. Temperatures will drop through the afternoon, so in the morning we could be at 11 or 12 by the afternoon, many of us in single figures, and again feeling colder because of the gusty winds, which will continue to blow showers in across northern areas during Saturday night, turning increasingly to snow, even to lower levels by the end of the night across northern Scotland. It is turning colder, and through Sunday night in particular, this area of low pressure could bring some places some snowfall, certainly turning frostier with the risk of ice into next week.
I'm Camilla Tominey. Join me on GB News on Sunday mornings for a politics show with personality on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!